Can you see the screen?
Yes, we can see the screen. Oh, by the way, so I just go through, just see your content. Usually when we do the presentations, we always will list the author's information. And in this paper, I think the first author is supposed to be a very senior researcher in the field of phishing.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and usually when we are working on the research project, we not only look into their work, but also we will follow the name. For example, suppose if there's also it's a Turing Award winner like Hinton's. So sometimes we need to pay more attention. And also, just like we make friends, if there's one stranger who is a very famous student, or who is like for the top first honor class students, so usually we may pay more attention. And then also, just like when we do the research, we have a knowledge graph of these projects. And I think the author name and author's research team is also one of the knowledges we're going to investigate in this paper.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. So the paper, yeah. So the motivation of this paper is basically phishing, right? We all know that phishing is increasing over the years. However, web-based malware is decreasing. So phishing has become a huge part of cybersecurity research. So prior to the paper, they did some analysis on phishing kits, live phishing kits, and they found out that phishing websites will observe embedding resources like images, fonts, or JavaScript posted on third-party domains, including the domains which belongs to the organizations that they are mimicking. And the advantages of using third-party resources includes ensuring consistency between the look and feel of a legitimate website. And also, this reduces the cost of maintenance, the cost and effort of maintenance, because by using this, there is no need for frequent updates of the website. And second is they found out that phishing websites usually redirect victims to legitimate websites after victims enter their credentials.
So that is conform to what we observed. That is conform to what has been observed by Qingzhou, right? So once we visiting a phishing website, and overall, it will just not tell you that your password is just a failed. It will redirect you to the real website or the real legitimate website, and to fix that make you unaware of the fact that you have lost your credential.
So based on these two key observations, they came up with this hypothesis whereby organizations could potentially track visitors' activities on certain phishing websites by inspecting the HTTP or HTTPS requests for the embedded web resources which they embed in the phishing websites within their own system, and also identifying the referrals from suspicious sources. This referrals is from when phishing websites redirect their victims to legitimate websites.
Let me think about it. So the hypothesis or there are suggestions. It sounds more like suggestion there, right? So, so the point is that based on the fact that the phishing website will usually redirect the victims to the legitimate website, so it's going to track such a redirection flow to see whether any phishing website has already began to redirect. And is that possible that we can observe, or organizers can observe some requests are from the redirected, caused by the redirect action. Is that
Yeah,
possible?
yeah, that's why they came out with the golden hour framework.
Golden hour framework. What's that?
Yeah. Okay, I will explain it later. So the data set for golden hour framework, right, is they collaborated with a financial service provider who is also one of the top 10 most phish organization. The big financial service provider will provide the source of the data set. And for the period of about roughly
That's supposed to be the PayPal, right?
yeah, they did not really mention explicitly, but based on the emails,
Mm.
is probably
Okay, so you say somehow the researchers and authors need to hide the name of such a financial service provider, right?
mm, if they're really
Mm.
hiding, I don't think they will put the email
Mm.
on the front page. Anyway, so the period is about 1 year, and roughly about 4.8 million victims were recorded, and roughly about 19 million total web events. So what are web events? Web events are ingested into the golden hour framework. So the golden hour framework consists of mainly 5 stages. So the first stage is where web events are ingested from web traffic logs. And there are two types of events, mainly the page URLs, which the embedded web resource will be triggered when victims visit a phishing website, and also referring URLs, where the victims will be redirected from the phishing websites. So these two web events will be ingested into the first stage, and for each
I'm
event,
sorry, I have to
and
interrupt it here. So the web events, so you are saying the victims, and for now, is that possible for us to identify the victim? Is
mm,
that possible?
yes, only if you have the organization's data.
Okay, if we have the even if we have the organization data, let's assume that this organization is PayPal. And here we're saying that we they can find the, the event type of the page. Sorry, so here I'm really confused. And what do you mean by a page URL event type?
Like mentioned earlier, page URL is when the embedded web resources in the phishing website is being triggered,
Okay.
and
And
referring is when the victim is redirected into the legitimate organization website.
how can we know this?
Based on the two observations earlier, they found out that these two will be triggered to the
Yeah,
legitimate.
so for example, I know the Node.js and there's an Ajax framework. They provide a very rich set of the resources which can be shared by many websites. And how do they know they are requested by a phishing website or a benign website or some unknown small website?
Very good question. That's where the stage 2 and stage 3 comes into place.
Okay.
Okay, so after they annotate each event with attributes, right?
Mm.
They apply a whitelist filtering to remove the benign events. For example, like what you mentioned, request to the organization's legitimate website or with referrals on approved partner websites. So they once they go through this whitelisting filter, they then do a URL correlation with a recent list of known phishing URLs from
So based on the blacklist.
additional sources. Yes,
Mm.
not just blacklisting. Yeah. Then events that are flagged as phishing will be dealt with mitigation immediately, and then the others will be archived. And over time, they further refine the archive events and also refine the data sources and feeds, where the data sources is from APWG, e-crime exchange feed, the organization's proprietary feed and traffic detection system.
Okay. So would you please, I'm not sure whether this has been mentioned in the paper. So is that possible to be more specific of the organization's proprietary
No.
feed and also there's a traffic detection system. So somehow it means that based on the traffic detection, when we look into the traffic, we can somehow know the e-crime is happening.
Yeah, both of these are the organization's proprietary system.
Mm,
So,
mm,
um, I guess like the main idea of this
mm.
paper is not about the implementation; it's mainly more about the framework.
So it's more so we do have a fishing discovery experiment a framework here, a fishing discovery framework here. So I think this framework sounds like straightforward, right? It's more like a very straightforward. So the web events is logged And once they got a log event, they have a blacklist and have a whitelist. Just to fill out the events. And when these events are left, and they just do the. Hey, by the way, for the last step, there's a refinement. Is this refinement done manually or
Yeah, manually.
manually?
Also, they mentioned that this framework can be done like in the online manner or like in the offline manner, as long as you have the web events.
Mm.
Also,
But the point, you can think about it. So when we have an event, suppose, so these, you can consider these whole steps as a program, and this program have taken input of the web event, of the URL visiting, or so, sorry, the event of resource requesting, or the event of requesting a resource, or uh, redirecting a page, right? Redirect to the page, and the ultimate goal is that they want to classify whether these resource request or the source the source sending the request and the source transferring these URLs is come from the phishing website, right?
mm,
Let me repeat my questions. So the ultimate framework is going to take the input of the sources requesting common form and the image resources, or the sources redirecting to some legitimate website, right? They want to find out whether, and they want to find out whether those sources are phishing website, and that's all.
no,
Hmm?
that's not the main contribution of this framework. The main contribution of this framework actually allows them to do proactive mitigation and detection. Because here, right, they do correlation of with a recent list of non-phishing URLs from here, right, from the external data sources or feeds. And through the URL correlation, they can maybe find out like URLs that were not blacklisted before. Because like uh,
Mm,
phishing URL, sometimes they will change the path or the subdomain, but
mm.
mainly it's the same.
Behavior.
It is the same phishing.
Yeah, I understand. So giving a website, if you change the domain names, it will not be in the list anymore. So the idea that they want to learn the traffic or the, am I right? They want to learn the traffic
They want to
behavior.
do proactive detection and mitigation.
Yeah, so somehow, so more like,
Maybe this will be clearer when I show
okay,
the
okay,
results. Yeah.
okay.
Okay. So these are the high level stages of a typical phishing attack. I don't think I need to go through all of this, right? So the paper will mostly be focusing on the stages from B to G. So there are four
Sorry, let me go
types.
through the steps. Attack distribution, the victims fit, monetizations, and okay, okay, please go on.
Yeah, this is quite standard. Okay, so there are four types of user. The first one is known visitors. These are the visitors which contains a session or device identifier previously known to the organization. And thus they can be linked with a certainty that this visitor is a known visitor to the organization. And crawler events are which the organization classified as automated traffic, but this is using the organization's proprietary software. And others is if neither of them falls into place. And
Mm.
for the last
So,
one,
so you're talking
compromise.
about organization. So, for example, this organization is PayPal,
Mm,
right? So it's first going to see what kind of, so somehow it will keep a list of the visitors, right? It will just check whether the visitor. How could, is there anything there be unknown visitor?
I'm sorry, what?
How could be there's unknown visitors?
How could that? Sorry, can you rephrase your question?
So, so I'm just talking, just thinking about the non-visitors. So giving a non-visitors, it will, it's more like a session or device. So somehow when so it's not a user recorded in the organization, right? So for example, when we are using Gmail, if we go to another country and log into Gmail, and then Gmail will send us a security alert saying that there's anomaly logins in your account. Is that really you, right? There's something like this. So these non-visitors is more like this kind of type. Given organizations send login event, when we look into login event, we say it is a non-visitors.
So these visitors um, do must first visit the organization prior to visiting the phishing page, so that the organization will have information on the session or device identifier of these visitors.
Yeah, yeah.
Mm.
Mm,
Okay, so for compromised visitors, they define it as known visitors whose accounts were subsequently either accessed by the attacker or had at least one fraudulent transaction.
mm,
Okay, so for the end-to-end timeline of phishing, they plot this graph, where is number of hours relative to detection. So 0 hour means when it is detected. So they found out that roughly about 9 hours before detections, the first non-victim visits occurs around there, and the the first victim visits and the first email sent is roughly around there as well.
Oh, by the way, so can you be more specific about the victim visit?
What do
So
you
this is
mean?
still so they recorded the timeline of phishing, right? So what's the relevance between these slides and the previous slides? I somehow got lost there.
So
So
they record, yeah. So they plotted the compromised visitors against the number of hours relative to detection.
so they assume that an account has already been compromised.
No, as in after that, they also look into whether or not the account has been compromised, and also the average number of days for the accounts to be compromised. But these are basically the victims, and also because the
Mm,
victims were redirected from the suspicious URLs, right? So
mm,
they know that these are victims.
okay. So this is an empirical observation. So
Mm.
so the first event is supposed to be the non-victim visit. Uh,
So they say that this could be when the fishers are testing out their fishing kits. So that's why it happened before the victim visit.
oh, sorry, I missed the information. So the first non-victim, will please be said again about the first non-victim visit?
It is where the fishers
Mm.
has their fishing kits.
Okay, so that's mean the time when it set up the phishing kit.
Mm.
Mm.
Okay, so
Mm.
about 38% of victim traffic still took place after the detection,
Mm.
which is quite a huge amount of traffic. And also for the top 10 largest attacks, it actually accounts for 89% of the targeted victims.
So here the victim means users, not the organizations.
Yes, not the organization.
Top 10% of largest attacks account. So it means that these victims keep are being attacked frequently. And how could that be? So how can I use this to, because there's no point to ask the victim to keep typing into his or her credential information, right?
Mm-hmm.
So why 10% of the largest attacks account for 89% of the attacked victims?
Which means that the top 10% of the attacks, right, are the
Hmm.
more successful ones.
Okay. Oh, yeah, I got it. Sorry. So let me
Mm.
go through the graph here. So, and after 3 hours, so what here the first crawler visit. So
Identified by the organization's proprietary crawler.
yeah.
Traffic
So
detect.
so so what's the point of looking into the crawler? And what's the relation between the crawler and the fisher or the
Mm,
victim? and who built the crawlers, and why the crawler, and this crawler, could that be a search engine, right?
Yes, it's for detection.
It's for the, and I didn't get the relation between the crawler. So anyway, the crawler event can happen anytime, anywhere.
Mm.
And also the first victim visit. So this is talking about a phishing site, right? Or organization.
You mean this graph
Yeah, this graph.
is the victims of the organization?
The victims of organizations.
Mm.
If it is the victim organizations, and how it is related to the phishing, you can look at this one. Let me annotate. So the first point is that the fisher set up the phishing website, right here,
Mm.
and then
Wait,
it's
don't go for
then
sure.
it's,
Mm.
and send the emails and some victims visit the website, right?
Mm.
And these two events are actually just related to a phishing website,
Mm.
right? It's
Related.
some, yeah.
Mm.
So you can see the fisher starts a phishing website, right?
Mm.
So that means the first no victim visit is more like this. So first of all, we create a phishing, not we, a fisher create a phishing website.
Mm.
Then the fisher send the emails, and then some user visits this website, right?
Mm.
And all somehow talking about a phishing website and the crawlers, and then we're talking about the crawlers and what page does this crawler crawl? A phishing web page or the web page of a legitimate website?
The phishing.
The phishing is before.
This crawler is actually you can refer to this timeline here. This crawler traffic is actually under mitigation. So actually the
Mm,
main point of this, right, is just that the first
mm,
victim traffic will occur first, then the mitigation traffic will come into place. And then when the peak traffic of about half of the victim visits happens, then the peak crawler traffic will happen. But even after detection,
mm,
the 90% of the number of visits from the victim still continues, and
mm.
until about roughly 8 hours, then the 90% of the victim visits.
Okay, so let me ask. So this site is listed as malicious by who?
By the major web browsers, the blacklisting.
Okay, so it is actually you are talking about the Google Safe Browsing.
It could
It could
be.
be a Google Safe Browsing. Mm.
Mm,
The number of visits. So it's somehow that we're talking about a phishing website, right? On average, a phishing website.
mm,
It's more like a phishing website, just like a. It's more like uh, it's more like we're talking about this process, right? We're talking about this process, and suppose a phishing website has been set up, and how its visiting traffic grows, increase, and decrease
mm,
in those several stages,
mm,
right? So it is actually not that relevant to a victim organization. So for now, this web page has nothing to do with an organization such as PayPal, Microsoft, or Amazon. It is just showing that, and the main point is that even after detections, it still have a lot of visitors within 8 hours,
mm,
and that's the main idea it take. It is a main takeaways of this graph.
mm.
Last visit about it's about 38% of the victim traffic. Mm, okay, okay.
Mm.
And what's the so what? So if we have these ideas, and
Yep.
I assume that this idea, I didn't see any. very exciting points from
Mm,
this graph.
yeah,
Mm.
so based on this framework, right, they suggested that the organization can do proactive detection and mitigation about roughly 8 hours prior to detection. And
This
this
is for victim. This is for clients, right?
organization, yeah,
Organization. So
organization
and
can,
and in your word, and what's the difference between clients and organizations and victims?
clients, I'm not sure what do you mean
Okay,
by
so
clients.
the clients might be a users who visit a website. It's more like clients, and the victims are always the clients.
Mm-hmm.
So we are organized the concepts about talking about this research, and here we're talking about a victim. Victim is supposed to be a client, right? And here you're talking about proactive detection. So it is for the client side or from the browser side.
Oh, it is from the organization to help with the client.
The organization to help with the client. And how can the organization do this job? Suppose I'm the PayPal, and how can I help?
Yeah, so prior to detection of the web-based browser detection, right, the
Mm,
organization can do their own proactive detection and mitigation, whereby the URL correlations previously can help discover previously unknown phishing URLs, which I mentioned earlier.
mm.
And also, such URLs can then be reported to the detection backends and propagated through the anti-phishing ecosystem.
And what is anti-phishing ecosystem here?
The web-based browser detection.
Okay, so more like the so-called anti-phishing ecosystem is actually means the blacklist.
Mm.
And but the problem is that there's you can see. I remember that maybe 1 month or 2 months ago, Qingzhou have reported that. So it will provide a similar results as in your paper, as in this paper. It's saying that given the phishing web page, it takes about a few hours or sometimes a few days to for this phishing website to be put into the blacklist. And but the problem is that they need to manually verify it. So giving some users reported it as phishing, and somehow the system, of course, they will have an automatic way, but somehow sometimes they need the manual verification to put into the blacklist, to put that
Mm.
URL into a blacklist. And
Mm.
so that is more like a dynamic blacklist to keep being updated, recording the URLs or domains used by the fisher.
Mm.
And here, if such a URL is reported to the detection backends, uh, so how confident it is and how accurate it is there is that supposed to be a false positive? And maybe those kind of questions you will be answered later. But I just really
Oh.
curious and so you can see if we would like to adopt such a function, the URL correlations must be very, very accurate, right?
Mm.
Because this phishing URL has not been confirmed and you are saying that it is guilty, right?
They
So
just say that they use substring matching, but they didn't um, evaluate whether or not the
mm,
false positive or
yeah,
accept.
because this work is very much like Qingzhou's FYP project. Qingzhou's FYP project would like to understand the dynamic behavior or the dynamic fingerprint of the phishing behaviors. So in this case, it's somehow similar to those kind of URL correlation. So, but I'm just not sure whether such a URL correlation is static or dynamic. I don't know this information.
Mm. They have a paper on their URL classification. Um,
But the problem is that if it is URL can tell all the stories, there's no need for the Fishpedia. The problem is that the URLs, as long as there's the URL features which can corresponding to a phishing website or phishing features, because URL is there so large number of URLs, so the phishers can take any of the URLs. URL based detections is more like an obsolete technique because URL,
Yes.
as a matter of fact, convey none of the phishing features,
Mm.
right? So even if they have some statistic correlation, it means nothing because the fisher can easily change their URL and evade the detection system if the detection
Mm.
system is built fully based on the URL features.
That's why they suggest that after 12 hours of detection, right,
Mm.
they should improve mitigations like the browser-based mitigations because there are still quite a lot of traffic coming in. For example, they just mentioned like reducing the delay in response time of the browser-based warnings.
And
But they
how, so isn't that because isn't the Google Safe Browsing an offline approach or an online approach?
I'm sorry, what?
Let's take in Google Safe Browsing as an example.
Mm-hmm.
Assuming that a phishing website has already put into the blacklist, the dynamic blacklist of the Google Safe Browsings,
Mm.
and of course, all our Chrome browsers will actually be equipped with Google Safe Browsing, right?
Mm.
As long as we visit a website and the Google Safe Browsing will block it for us. And is that process an offline process or online process?
Based on what I know, right?
Mm,
Mm, Chrome checks the URL of each site you visit, right?
mm.
And you have to download a local list of blacklist for
So,
the browser.
so your point is it's offline.
Yes, but the
But the
interval
point,
is
but I think
about
it's very
30
hard to
minutes.
be understood, very hard to explain it's offline, because dynamic list will be very very large,
It is
right?
about approximately 30 minutes each update.
30 minutes each updated.
Mm.
Um, so, but how large is the dynamic blacklist? So this
Oh,
is a
no idea.
question. Yeah,
Mm.
so because I understand if it's offline, it have to be updated every 30 seconds. If
Then
it have to be updated every 30 seconds, is that an economical way
30
to
minutes.
30 minutes,
Mm.
right? So in that case, it means the user have to generate the request, or the browser have to generate a request every 30 minutes. Even the user did nothing. It will just keep running the programs and using the bandwidth. So is that an economical solution for that?
Mm.
And if that the case, why not just do just like a Google Safe, just like provide a Google service. Each time they just provide online visit.
Have to ask
So
Google.
yeah. Here's my question is that, so in this paper they're saying that the reactive mitigation improvement, say, but I can hardly think about how can it be further mitigated, because as long as a phishing website has been put into the blacklist, and all the browsers supposed to block this website as soon as possible, right?
Mm.
The only way is that some of the browsers have not been updated with such a blacklist.
Oh, there is also another kind of delay
Mm,
where the user reports the website as suspicious, right?
mm.
And Google will have to verify whether or not it is suspicious before
But
it
I
can
should,
be.
but I assume that your point means on this point.
Yes.
Yeah,
So
but so
before
here, and how could it be delayed? Because Google has already done. If Google has decided this domain is a phishing website, you can just block it. And
before
all,
they
mm,
decide,
mm,
they have to first determine whether or not the reported pages is phishing. So they have to do their manual
mm.
analysis. So I guess this analysis is quite similar to Qingzhou's work.
Yeah, and yeah, and also this process may happen in this area, right?
Mm,
You know, it takes maybe 1 hour to decide whether the site is efficient.
yeah, but the
And
thing
then, and
is,
after that, so we are actually talking about this side. So as long as the browsers has already decided the site with such a domain is a phishing site, and how come it will still take us so long time? Because as long as we updated the blacklist, and all the browsers were supposed to be blocked this site, as soon as possible.
because of evasion techniques.
Evasion technique.
Mm. Yeah, like the phishing kits, right?
Mm,
Sometimes they will generate user specific path. So
mm,
blocking specific URLs will not work in blocking the whole phishing website. And also sometimes this delay, this gap where Google Safe Browsing will have to verify the phishing website.
mm,
Sometimes the phishing websites already go offline or like be migrated into another path. So that's why there
mm.
are still a lot of
Yeah, if the problem is that if the path is changed dynamically, and how can the dynamic blacklist can work? If as far as I can remember, the dynamic blacklist is actually a URL instead of domain, right? If I understand it correctly. But of course, if a domain contains the phishing URL, that means this domain is actually legitimate in a denial, but it has been compromised by a phisher. But in that case, it may somehow still be considered a little bit malicious, but this domain is not phishing. So here come the questions. If the if the phishers can generate dynamic URLs, and how can the dynamic blacklist can work to do this, right? And second,
mm,
if this phisher website does not adopt the dynamic URLs, then how can it will be the case some some of the users will still some of the victims will still can visit this site when it has been blocked by Google Safe Browsing,
okay.
which
So
is
first
not.
question, right?
Mm,
First question, it was not mentioned in this paper, but because of the other paper that I read, the fish eye, it was actually observed that once there is a number of URLs with similar domains or like similar subdomains being blocked in Google Safe Browsing, they
mm.
actually observed that Google Safe Browsing blocks the whole
The
domain.
whole domain. Okay.
Mm,
Okay. So
so
that's a
that's
good
how it
answer. So
works.
that's a good answer. So let's move to questions. So once the Google has blocked domain or URL, whatever it is, if Google decide to block such a site, and how come the victims can still visit this website?
Mm, yeah, so it still takes some times where there is takes some times to accumulate that number of same domain or same subdomain URLs being reported first
Mm.
before Google Safe Browsing
No,
can
so
block the
you are
whole
talking about
domain.
this. This means that you are actually talking about the process before Google decided it's malicious. I'm
Before
saying, yeah, you're talking about the delay means that the Google,
that's
the
yes,
team, the Google team need to manually verify it,
no,
right?
no, no,
Still,
no.
mm,
It is big,
after, you mean
um,
after?
specific URLs
Mm,
have to accumulate to a certain number before the GSB will block the whole subdomain or the whole domain altogether.
mm,
So then each specific victim URL will not work. But it will take some time for it to accumulate to that threshold, I assume, which was not
mm.
mentioned. Anyway, even if Google Safe Browsing flagged as suspicious website, uh, users can still uh, ignore the warnings and proceed.
Yeah, I understand. But if that is the case, how could it be if if the user decide to ignore Google's warning? I assume that the change, so user decision will not change given the time, right? Because the user does not know when Google blocked it,
Mm-hmm, mm,
right? The user will not does not know the information. So
mm,
if that your explanation is correct, I'm not for you. I'm just saying look into the explanation, and these trends will be like this, or maybe like this. So a very few number of the users will still decide to visit this URL, for example,
mm,
for us, right? Because we are doing phishing researchers.
mm,
So that when Google decide to block it, we say, yes, we found a real fisher, right? We're doing this. But how come? But anyway, so maybe we stop discussing these issues, but I still a little bit suspicious. Maybe just you're saying that even the Google decided it's suspicious, it will still take a time for Google to propagate information to all of its
mm,
plugin, right? So it takes maybe 8 hours to let all the Chrome in the world to know this information.
Mm.
Okay, keep going on.
Okay, so based on these two, right, what the organization can do is that they can secure the affected user accounts.
Mm.
That is also part of the proactive mitigation.
So
So for
okay, please.
estimating the browser-based detection,
Mm.
they plotted this graph where they find the ratio between the compromised visitors for browsers with native defenses like Google Safe Browsing, and also compromised visitors for all browsers. We can see that
Negative defense means no defense or
no with defense.
with defense.
Mm,
Compromise the visitors.
okay, so we can
Mm.
see that about 2 hours after detection, the attack effectiveness decreased by more than 50%. But
Mm.
about roughly 8 hours, the attack effectiveness decreased to between 0 to 10%. Like what you said earlier, it could be due to security researchers, or it
Mm.
could be due to victims to ignoring the browser warning. So the main takeaway for this is that browser-based detection clearly is an effective mitigation overall, but something else can be done for the remaining 0 to 10% trickle that still happen many hours after detection. So based on the discussion that we had earlier, this could mainly be this could be due to some phishing kits applying evasion techniques to evade such mitigation, or it could be due to the delay or lag time in implementing the browser-based detection, or simply users ignoring the warnings.
Mm.
Okay, so other observations, they use a previously developed URL classification to classify the URLs. So this is basically just a graph showing that the majority of the URLs that they analyze utilize only deceptive path, and the next is deceptive domain, and lastly is deceptive subdomain. And about roughly quarter actually utilizes non-deceptive URL.
Mm.
With this, right, they come up, they actually said that with the increasing use of mobile devices to browse the internet, the importance of URL content has diminished because this is due to the limited mobile screen space in the mobile web browsers. So this is just like an insight that they observe.
Sorry, the importance of a URL content has been diminished. Would please be more specific on this part. For example, my suspicion or my speculation is that even if it is a URL, so that given the same URL, it can be rendered on the desktop screenshot or on the mobile screenshot. But if the fisher wants the attack to be successful, it need to always leave a form for user to fill in its credential information, right? And how could if that the case, how can it be that the importance of your content diminished? They will adjust the dynamic adjusted based layout, right?
Mm, no, think from a user point of view, because of this graph, right?
Mm.
It would seem that the majority of the suspicious URL utilize deceptive path. So from the user point of view, right, one may think that they might they want to check the content of URL for deceptive path in order to determine whether or not a website is a phishing website. But because of the increasing use of mobile devices to browse the internet, the importance of checking the URL content has diminished because because of the limited mobile screen space in mobile web browsers. So users uh, might still be tricked into clicking the phishing web pages.
Mm. Okay.
Okay, so other observations, mm, they recorded the top 20 phishing campaigns by the known
Mm.
visitors event. So some of the key points here is that phishing campaigns would remain online as long as 9 months, which is this.
Mm.
The average campaign period is about roughly 13.6 days, and the top 5% of the attacks accounted for 77% of known visitors events. Okay, so
By the way, so let me look into this data again. So the phishing campaign will last for 9 months. so that's the largest the campaign. The campaigns means the phishing kit, right? So I'm still digesting this sentence because the phishing website can last only for a few days, right? The campaign period.
Mm.
So the 9 months is the longest duration,
Mm.
right?
Mm.
Mm.
These are just some
Would
of the
it please
concerns.
more space on this table?
Actually, this they just
And here, so saying that that is the rank one campaign. The rank one campaign is for one phishing site or a lot of phishing site.
is for one campaign. So how they determine the first and last day is based via the web events where they take note of the timestamp. So as long as like they don't see any more uh, known visitors coming from that phishing website, uh, they put it as the last seen date. So then they
And
do
how
their
can they
own
how based on what criteria do they rank the campaign?
based on the number of known visitors
Based
events.
on non-visitor events. Non-visitor events. Let me think about it. The non-visitor events. Will you please go back to previous slides? I would like to check the type of events.
Mm.
Mm, so non-visitor events. Okay. But if it is okay, so if it is a non, you can think about it. If it is non-event, because all the traffic is taken from the phishing campaign, right? So
Mm.
how could it be a non-visitors? It's supposed to be a compromised visitors, or the information coming from the non-visitors has not been compromised.
So those traffic is basically compromising. Uh, not compromising is a bad word. Comprising both compromised and victims.
Okay, so it's combined non and a compromised visitors altogether, saying
Because
they,
compromised are known
mm,
visitors. Right?
mm, yeah, but actually they distinguish non and a compromised ones, right?
Mm. Mm.
And also the ranking means that successful, being successful. So the higher the rank, the more successful the phishing campaign,
Mm.
right? Because more visitors going to visit this URL,
Mm.
and at least it was visiting the URLs. So based on here, it's just purely based on the used resources, the use the requested the sources requesting the common font or images, and the referring the source referring to these legitimate URLs, and all based on information to see whether the phishing is just a lie.
Mm.
Let me recap it. So maybe I somehow lost it. So here we have organization, and these organizations were actually were taking from the sources from the other. And how about this? Let me clear it here. So here is a research team. Let's say it's RT, right? And RT is taking have a cooperation with organization. Let's say it's org, right?
Mm.
And a given org, this organization will actually were taking two resources. The first is that it keeps a lot of common font images and these resources. And second, it collected redirecting. And when anyway, these two kind of, let's say these are requests, right? And the first one is requesting the font and images, and the second one is somehow redirecting the images to these organizations. When the organization has got information, he will try to uh, classify which of these traffic coming from the phishing website. Based on the information, it sends this information to research team to see how long a phishing lasts. Am I correct, or there's something I missed?
They can see how long, yes, because they have the timestamp.
Yeah. So somehow it means that the organization had the capability to decide whether it is a phishing purely based on the request. Am I right?
They go through the whitelist filter first and then the URL correlation.
Okay. So, but somehow there's still a problem whether the organization or the platform is accurate enough, right? Because purely based on the traffic or purely based on URL is not that reliable. So that is the case. But anyway, let's assume they are correct. So somehow the research team has the capability to know the top 20 campaigns. Okay. And based on their non-validity events.
But these 20 campaigns are targeted for this organization only, so it's not like the whole phishing landscape.
Sorry, this organization is actually somehow like PayPal, right? It's a PayPal. Okay. More like a PayPal. And then, okay. So okay. So somehow I got it. I recap a bit. So then we're talking about the distinctive URL reported, and so for these columns, so this campaign ranking first have 41 URLs, distinctive URLs, and can you be more specific on this part or this fact?
They did not really go into it, but I would assume that it is just the evasion techniques, the result of the evasion techniques.
Yeah, so somehow that means one campaign can corresponding to a lot of or many URLs, right? So then I will going to raise the question of campaign. So because we read a paper not just for reading paper, we're going to read a paper to extract as much information as possible to feed into our own research. So that is ultimate goal. So from this point, I'm going to ask whether this research team has already developed a campaign similarity measurement, because given their different URLs, if they share the same campaign, how do they know this fact?
How do they know this? Okay, so they never really go into it as well, but they did mention something about URL classification. So I would assume that they use it to link.
Yeah, I'm not sure how reliable it is, but of course, I do not assume that you definitely have the answer, because that is one of the reasons why we need to discuss, not just read a paper, not just go through videos, because when we go through the videos, we learn information passively. But when we're talking to these slides, we will have very detailed discussions, slide by slide, and understand the detailed information. Okay, so somehow it means that for these papers, we have two assumptions or two speculations. The first is that the organization PayPal just purely based on the traffic to decide if the traffic is exactly similar. They believe that, but they come from different URL. We think that this URL, based on the fingerprint, it will determine the same campaigns as being resided into different URLs. They aggregate these URLs altogether. Another is that they may have the capability of crawling the campaigns and compare it. But of course, I incline to believe the former, or the first guess. Okay, let's go back to the last two columns about the URL text classification.
These are just some of the observations that they have. So some of it has deceptive path only, some with deceptive subdomains, but it's mostly just a mixture of all.
So somehow giving a text of URL, just going to classify the URL purely based on, going to classify it into phishing or non-phishing purely based on the URL text.
Yes, URL correlation.
And also based on the text domain, it's going to classify it.
I'm sorry, what?
I mean, the last column, giving a URL, giving the text of domain, it's also just to classify it.
Yeah, it's just an observation where.
I seriously doubt the reliability of their results. How could the URL and domain itself to be considered to be, how can URL text and domain text enough for decided phishing? It is a little bit, it worries me a little bit.
No, as in, so these are just some of the observations that they made, but actually the main point of this paper is the framework and not so much on the results. Okay, so they also noted some of the sophistication and evasion insights, but these are quite standard. So I will just go through it briefly. So some of the phishing kits were found fully mimicking the legitimate websites, including the links and resources, and some are found with advanced automatic translation of phishing web pages based on the victim's geolocation. And phishing kits also includes human verification like CAPTCHA to handle the verification of phishing content by automated systems like maybe Google web browsing. And also tricking the users into proceeding with phishing websites due to the use of CAPTCHA on legitimate websites. And all phishing kits analyzed actually leverage on server-side cloaking that seeks to block traffic based on the blacklist.
Okay, by the way, so have we ever found any clocking function or code in our observed phishing kits?
This is basically anti-bots, HTXS.
So in that case, I think the anti-bot could be a kind of feature, right? So when we are comparing two phishing kits, I think maybe the solution is that to raise the threshold instead of just throwing away those anti-bot code.
You're talking about my project?
Yeah, I'm talking about your project.
It depends on the goal that you want, because currently our goal is to match similar. I'm not sure if this is okay to be recorded, but
but I've got my gut feeling that we should not throw away the anti-bot code. Maybe we need to
discuss again on Monday.
Yeah, sure. So because you can see there's all the features of phishing, for example, the catch-up, right, to avoid and also they were the automatic translation. I think this slide is kind of important. It will be useful for our future instruction. So consider this. All existing phishing detection systems is just to look into the rendered code, the rendered HTML code on the client side, but we are actually looking into the server side. We are going to provide a platform protection system. So assuming that there's a lot of phishing websites supported or hosted by Amazon platform or Amazon virtual machine, I think it will be possible for this cloud platform to equip it with a technique to verify whether there's a malware server deployed on a malware service deployed on this cloud platform, right? So those features are all very important. Maybe you can take this screenshot again, and we can discuss on our Monday meeting.
I have the slides. So yeah, some phishing kits automatically generate a victim specified path. So this is to evade crawlers, and also man-in-the-middle proxies were found. And such proxies could potentially defeat most form of 2FA. And
by the way, I'm going to check the last points. So it's called a man-in-the-middle proxies. Just means to interact with the
legitimate organization's website.
kind of clever, right?
Sorry, what?
Kind of clever, I'm saying. The
I think
proxy.
it's quite common nowadays.
So it can mimic all the interaction. Okay? By this means interaction will be exactly the same, right? So Qingzhou's work may be evaded by this. Hey, is Qingzhou there? Oh, Qingzhou. Okay, Qingzhou is not there. But anyway.
It's becoming more and more common. Just
okay,
like
so all these, I'm saying, I'm looking to these, our projects or the master
hello.
project.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Me?
Yeah, I'm calling you for here.
Is it?
Yeah.
Oh, captcha is it?
Yeah, I'm saying that for your FYP project, we are looking into the behavior phishings. So can our technique to defend the man-in-the-middle proxies? So that means giving a client and giving the phishing just play the role of proxy. It take a request of a client and send it back to the real servers, and then it takes the response from the server and send it back to the client. Can our approach defend such a technique?
No, we cannot. Yeah, it cannot.
Yeah, I understand it's based on existing solution cannot. But my point is that any way to defend, any solution to defend this.
I don't think I can't think of any based on the current scope of the using the current parameters. I don't think so. I can't think of any.
Maybe from the traffic level.
But if the traffic level is on server side, then
yeah,
you cannot detect anything, right?
How about the handshaking process?
But if you can't tell who the server is connecting to.
Maybe the public key. Maybe we can call the public key because when a client is going to interact with the servers, we probably need to using the public key to do this job. So public key will specifically saying that this key is because if we are going to, for example, if we're going to visit the PayPal, we should equip it with a public key, right? So if the host will return a different public key, so that somehow means that this server is a little bit problematic.
Yeah, but
because please.
The thing is that some sites they look at PayPal and then they're not PayPal but they're like the back end admin of the site or something like that. So they're on a different page and they have a different key and then you can't tell.
Oh, you mean the server just send the legitimate public key to that?
No, I mean they're like the issue they were having now is that some sites they look legitimate because they are Outlook servers or something like that. So you cannot judge based on the public key alone for those sites.
But no, I'm saying that we are we can just say it is not an office. It is not a Microsoft Office. We just want to say this, right?
Yeah, but okay. But there are other brands also, not only Microsoft Office.
Okay, so maybe we can talk.
Maybe talk more about it. Okay, I'll show you more brands.
Yeah. So I'm just thinking about this. So because Kang Sing's presentations on this part is very interesting. So there are a set of the way to, for example, the clockings and the dynamic list, dynamic URLs, and the man-in-the-middle proxies. And for our Kang Sing's project, we somehow need to find the code corresponding to this behavior. That means a code feature to generate a victims with a path and a code feature to play a role in the middles. As long as we can collect those kind of
features. It may be very hard to find those.
Why? So suppose we find a phishing.
Those are higher level stuff, right? So it's unlikely that those kind of phishers will leave their phishing kit out exposed.
So that depends on whether we can collect the phishing keys with those kind of functions, because Kang Sing is actually crawling the phishing keys all over the world.
I don't think a crawling approach. The thing is that when you crawl phishing kits, right, you're looking for for fishers that leave their kids exposed, correct?
Looking for phishing for one.
That fishers that leave their kids exposed.
Yeah, yeah. You.
So
Yeah.
those are like normally less sophisticated fishers. So they normally don't have such like complicated stuff. I believe that
not necessary. So because so I remember Kang Sing once reported a paper. So Fisher is just more like a junior beginners. There's also the inventor or creator, right? So I'm not sure whether I use the terminology correctly. So it is the creator who created the phishing kits. Then they spread the phishing kits to those fisher, and then fisher deploy the phishing kits for them, right? So they have in this case, of course, these phishing kits provide a very advanced feature, like the main and middle proxies, but it cannot avoid the careless or beginner fishers to leave such a phishing kits on some website.
Yeah, but like these kind of phishing kits are probably more expensive. So like those beginner fishers probably may not have access to it. I don't know. Maybe
Yeah,
if
because
they find it, it'd be great.
Depends on
just hypothesizing.
Yeah, so Kang Sing all relies on you to find a more phishing kits. The more dynamic, the better. Okay. So I think that's enough for this page, and let's look into the detail on this part. But overall, I think the public key might be another very important features. So for now, you can see our Phishpedia and the phishing intention projects look into the appearance, totally based on the appearance. But later, if there's maybe some public key, because now the blockchain technique is very popular and very hot in these days. One of the reasons is that it's using the encryption and the e-signature techniques in a very reliable way. And I think maybe the phishing keys or encryption decryption technique could be used in our technique. But of course, if we are using public key in the future, it only depends on whether depends on the assumption that the most legitimate big companies all using public key, right? Okay, let's keep going on.
So here are some of the limitations that they highlight for the paper. First is that the data is based on the victim's traffic to the phishing websites that targets the single organization, which may skew the findings. Second is the success of phishing attacks hinges on numerous other factors, like content and the type of lure, which was not considered in the paper. And third is the approach does not guarantee the
sorry, what means that's the type of original lure?
Which means the email that they send to lure the victims into clicking it. Then the approach does not guarantee the detectability of an arbitrary phishing website, because phishers can exclude any trackable third-party files or avoid redirecting the victims back to the organization's website. So this is one of the limitations of the paper. And the lastly is that there is a limited number of sources, currently only 3, and to correlate the URLs. So for future work, they mentioned should make.
By the way, so actually our phishing discovery platform can be used by all the other organizations. Think about it. So giving for their approach, they are just using the organization's priority images or resources, right? So it's based on assumption that someone is going to link the back to the PayPal website, taking its logos and taking its images, and that phishing website. As long as the phishing website do this job, and the PayPal will know that it has been used as a phishing target. But given our phishing platform, we can provide this information to any organizations, not only PayPal's, and even someone is not using PayPal's resources and images. But with the capability of the facilities of the Phishpedia, we can also give such information to PayPal, right? So somehow would be comprehensive, provide a complement the capability of these studies. Yeah. Okay.
They did mention that the golden number framework, right, is brand agnostic.
Yeah, I
so
think
our organization can.
Yeah. Okay. So is that all? Okay. Okay. So this is process. And can you summarize? So somehow we have detailed discussions on this work. And could you go back to the first page, the first page,
First page.
the sunrise to the sunset. And can you summarize this paper in one or two sentences?
Okay, so the paper contributes mainly on developing a golden hour framework
Mm.
that provides an insight on the end-to-end life cycle and effectiveness of the phishing attacks at scale.
It's just a simply the title.
One or two sentences, yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So maybe I think one of the uh, useful the points useful is that it is raise a set of the features of phishing kits, and also to somehow review the possibility of traffic, using trafficking features to detect the phishing. So maybe we can let's discuss more uh, in our Mondays meetings.
Yeah.
But overall, first is that Kang Sing, so you remember there are the slides of the code of maybe clockings, code of clockings, code of the proxies. Let's see whether the phishing kits, our crowd phishing kits will include this kind of code.
Actually,
And,
yeah, I
and,
have.
and the second, maybe don't worry, and let's take the risky of me being lectured again, and maybe we can increase the frequency of the crawling, the phishing kit crawlings, and we would like to crawl as much phishing kits possible, and then we will work into to analyze those phishing kits automatically and to provide a template, and also think about yeah, and also I think we can further one of the idea we have is that we maybe using public key might be another idea to do this job.
I think we can discuss more on
Yeah,
Monday.
yeah, okay. Okay, good job, Kensing.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, the next talk supposed to be Xianglin. Hello, Xianglin, are you still there?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So will you please share the slides and let's have a detailed discussion.
Mm,
Mm,
so the paper is called Decision Boundary Analysis of Adversarial Examples. It is published
mm,
in ICLR in
mm.
2018. And so the authors are all from UCB, and the last I didn't find the photo of the first author.
So
But
he is supposed to be an engineer. He is engineer in UCB.
no, he was a PhD graduate from UC Berkeley.
Okay, he
Then
go to
he became
industry.
a
He go to industry.
yeah.
Okay,
And
and
those uh,
and the second also was still in a research institute.
yeah.
Mm.
And no fun. When I searched for the last author Dorn Song, and
Mm.
I found out that Liang Zhenkai was
Your
her previous
student
postdoc. Uh,
postdoc. Okay.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
because Dong Song is a very senior professor
Mm,
in securities, and he got the MacArthur Award in United States. He is not only successful in academia, but
mm,
also successful in building the commercial startup. So he once given us talk, if you still remember that. I remember that he was still there. Not sure we're still there in UNS. He was
really?
given talk of in UNS talking about her startup
Oh,
on the data economy. So he somehow using some idea of the Shapley value to evaluate how. So overall, so the talk given by Prof Dong Song
mm,
is that he's saying that in the future the data privacy will be very important. For
mm,
example, the very big company like Facebook, Google's, they're going to use our data as much as they want, right?
mm,
But it's not fair. So it comes to a philosophical question, right? Is that
mm,
who should be the owner of our data? For example, I have all my information in Google's, and who should be the owner? If I am the owner, Google will somehow should pay me if he is going to use my data, right?
mm,
So here it comes to the question. But if the Google is owner and I have no right to my data at all, So from a very high level point of views, um, I think the more popular idea or more popular consensus is that we are supposed to be owner of our own data, right?
Yeah.
So in that case, we somehow need to be paid if the Google is going to use our data. But how? But how? So Prof. Dong Song's startup is going to address this problem. It's somehow going to address the problem of data privacy because data have the property that it will be easily to be copied and pasted. So as long as my data has been copied and pasted, and it will, my data will lose the scarcity. The scarcity, from a canonical point of view, scarcity did decide the price. If our data have no scarcity, and our data will not have the price. So here comes the problem about data economy. So how to build a technique such as data blockchain and security and privacy to make sure our data cannot be copied and pasted anymore. And also it is somehow related to the deep learning. For example, if someone going to train a model based on data, and as a deep learner, the deep learning model, the builder of deep learning model should not access to our data. So how to make sure he can train a well model? How can he train a good model with good accuracy without access to any of the data? So anyway, so Prof. Dong Song's job, academic or profile, is built on addressing those problems, and he will be very successful to building blockchain system to ensure that their privacy is have trust. Okay, so that's the background. So that's why we need to list a few profile of some big name here so that we can recognize them. And if in the future, I think I hope that the COVID situation will be gone in 1 or 2 years. And once that happens, you will got the chance to travel around the world to meet those big names. At that time, at least somehow you should know what he is doing, right? Otherwise, you say hello, and he say hello, and nothing to talk, right? Okay. I think that's enough for my talk here. Let's keep going on.
Yeah, I even searched for some of her interviews in YouTube, and I think she's very attractive.
Yeah, here's a big name, really big name.
And one thing, she mentioned that when she decided to dive into the deep learning research area, then she didn't know the knowledge of it, so she basically spent 4 days a week to read paper. And like
that interview is given by Andrew, right?
oh yeah.
Yeah, I still have an impression of that kind of interview.
So, anyway, the motivation of this paper is the first is deep neural network are vulnerable to all the adversarial examples, and recent defense technique on the adversarial examples is not enough. They think they only the existing technique in 2018 only examine local neighbors in the input space of deep neural network. And we would talk about two specific defense later, but all of them all have this limitation, is that they all look at the neighbor local neighbor of some input.
And how about, so when saying the local neighbor, so there's remote neighbors will still influence the vulnerability of the network, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
And to be more specific, adversarial attack is a technique that attempts to fool models by supplying deceptive input. So the amount of perturbation used to generate the adversarial samples is called the examples distortion. So later, maybe we would use perturbation or distortion interchangeably. Yeah, and there are two defense against the adversarial examples we will talk about in this paper. One is called adversarial training. That means we will first generate some adversarial samples against one model, and then use those adversarial examples along
as a data augmentation technique to retrain.
and retrain the whole model so that your new model would be robust to adversarial attack. And the second one is called and how to generate those adversarial samples is by using projected gradient descent, and I will talk about this more in later slides. And the other method is called region classification. So what it do is when it is given some input, it would generate it would uniformly sampled from a hypercube around the input sample and vote for the majority prediction as the final result. So that's why it is called.
Hey, is that
region.
somehow
Mm.
similar to Rofan's talk last week? So using a lot of sampled models to have a joint vote here.
Yeah, I would say there's
Mm.
some relation, but yeah, the high level idea is you do not only look at one input, you look at some input around it, and yeah,
Not necessarily the same, but somehow Rofan's work is going to generate. So let me take a metaphor for example here. So
I'm not so sure what she did now.
no, I mean he giving the presentation last week.
Oh, you mean
Maybe you were having discussion with Zhengfeng, but anyway, so here so the idea is that the region classification is more like robustness, talking about robustness. So here the first approach is going to enhance the model by repetitively generate adversary samples as augmentation. But once Rofan done an experiment that, of course, the adversary trainings can defend the old adversary samples, but the attackers can keep generating new adversaries based on the new model. Then again, the new model will be still vulnerable. And that's such a model, just like such a process, just like a police and a safe, or just like rat and cat campaigns. The defender can keep generating a defensive model, and the attackers can keep generating a compromising adversary samples. So almost giving our examples or giving our experiment, it seems that there's no end for such a process, right? And for the second process, it's more like a region classification, just like a small ball, right? So you're talking about a hypercube or maybe a hyperball around it, just like giving a sample here. So you somehow generate a neighbor in the hyperspace. You just perturbate the sample a little bit, and then you observe whether the prediction of the cross will be similar to the prediction of the dot, right? And evaluate how just to evaluate how whether those points will have a consensus prediction.
Yeah. So you just find the majority prediction.
And then you're giving the yeah. So I'm talking. What I want to talk just now is like this. So we have already have a consensus to understand the classifications is like a boundary, like just like a classification boundary in hyperspace, right? And on one side it is negative samples, and on the other hand it is positive sample. And for this approach, you just create a small ball around here, and if there's some disagreement, you're thinking it will be supposed to be an adversary sample, right? Am I right?
Yeah. Because here the assumption is even though your adversarial the original model will give a wrong prediction when given the adversarial sample, but the adversarial sample should be close to the benign sample, to the original samples. So the majority prediction around that sample should be the same. So I think that's the assumption.
But how about the defense? So the idea is going to.
So this is the defense.
So let me repeat your point. So your point is that giving adversary samples, you generate a set of neighbors of that samples, and it will not using the prediction of that sample. it's going to using a joint prediction by all its neighbors to correct its
Yeah.
prediction,
Yeah.
right?
Uh,
So here my point. So that's okay. That's okay. That's kind of defenders. But what I want to talk about is that so another way to doing this is that it's going to change the boundary. So somehow, do you still remember? But not sure you still remember this. That one Ruffin was given a approach. It's called the Bayesian deep neural network models.
mm,
So one idea to estimate the Bayesian network is then to keep dropping out the neurons on the network models. So you can think about it, when we keep dropping out the models, the classification boundary will have slight change. Let me use the colors. One dropout may cause the boundary change like this way, and another dropout may make the boundary change like this way. But anyway, so the new boundary will be different, but similar to the original boundaries. So idea is that we keep perturbate the boundary to see whether the
oh,
prediction will still be preserved. So that might be another way to look into. So more like, and this region classifications more like we look into the neighbors, and another way that we look into the boundary perturbation. So the one is about the perturbation on sample itself is very straightforward. Another perspective that we just perturbate on the boundary. So that will be another perspective.
yeah.
Okay. Mm.
Yeah, and also in comparison, the classification model only based on the input instance can be referred to as point classification.
Mm.
Yeah, and then it's a little bit introduction to the projected gradient descent. You might wanted to ask what is the difference between projected gradient descent and stochastic gradient descent. So first, need to know.
No,
Need,
nothing. I'm
yeah.
just copy.
Okay. So the difference between constrained and unconstrained problem. So for unconstrained problem, we have a function f that we try to minimize, and here we try to find an input x from n-dimensional space, and try to see which x can minimize the function f. So that's unconstrained minimization problem. And for constrained minimization problem, the setting is basically all the same, um, except that x, we put a constraint on x, so x can only comes from like a given set Q, which is a subset of n-dimensional.
Sorry, Xianglin.
Mm,
I would like to ask another question. Is that even so? Is there any experimental or empirical results showing that the the region? What's the name? Class,
region
the
classification.
region classification for this approach. Is there any empirical experimental support, or is
What?
this idea supported by an experiment?
So this is from a paper.
Different paper.
Yeah, a
Okay.
paper designed to defend some adversarial attack.
But if that is case,
Mm,
it means that if I'm the attacker,
mm.
we need to find a ball, and the neighbors of this ball are all adversary samples.
Oh,
Uh, right. So did you get my point?
no.
So here my point is here.
Oh,
So here is that, so suppose these adversary samples, it has three neighbors, right? And this adversary samples is predicted as negative,
yeah.
and all of the rest are positive. So
Mm,
based on these assumptions and the regional classification work, because
yeah.
we're not only looking to the prediction of the samples, but also looking to neighbors. But
Mm,
I'm saying that if I'm the attackers, if I'm going to compromise such a defense or
mm,
compromise such a defense, one way is that we need to find a small region, still small regions, and we're still looking the sample, but all its neighbors are all adversary samples. As long as we find such regions, we can compromise this region classification defense.
Yeah.
Right.
So that's what this paper did. They first proposed, oh no, they first introduced a defense strategy against adversarial sample, and they proposed a new adversarial attack method to compromise this region classification defense.
Oh, this is just what they do.
Yeah.
Okay,
So the high level idea for their paper is first they introduce those two defense strategy, and then they propose a new strategy, and they did experiment to show that their method works, and then they investigate the information about decision boundaries and use those informations to design a defense strategy to defend their own attack.
New approach. Okay, so
Yeah.
so like they do the junior white hat technique, then they invent a black hat technique, then giving the novel black hat technique, they further propose the white hat technique, right? Okay.
So so just the introduction of projected gradient descent. Why we would need this projected gradient descent is because when we do the perturbation on some input image, we would want the distortion or the perturbation to be minimized, or we would put a limitation on the perturbation so that it would not look so different from the original one. That's why we would need this projected gradient descent.
Sorry, I missed the point. Will you please repeat again?
Yeah, so
So you're talking about there's unconstrained minimization problems and constrained minimization problems.
yeah,
and the relevance between stochastic OSGD or the projected GD. So
first you need to know the difference between constraint and
yeah.
unconstrained.
We have got it. Yeah.
And why we would need a constraint problem is because when we do in practice, when we do the adversarial attack, we need to make sure the perturbation is as small as possible. So stochastic gradient descent is for the unconstrained minimization problem, and the projected gradient descent is used in the constrained minimization problem. Yeah, so they only add a new step. So this is the gradient descent. We only update xk plus 1 like this formula. And for the projected gradient descent, they add a new step. Is after they get the new after they calculate xk minus alpha k times the gradient, they will check if the new x falls in the set of Q. If not, they will find a new x inside Q that have the minimum distance to the one that can you get my idea?
I'm digesting it. So if so technically the answer
that means
is no.
For the unconstrained setting, we calculate this part and it is done, right? However, in the projected gradient descent, after you calculate that's denoted as like x prime, and they will check if x prime is indeed inside ZQ. If it's if the answer is yes, then they will go to another.
Keep going on. Yeah.
And
but I'm just trying to link the PGD with yeah. I mean link the PGD with the constraint because you mentioned that our new constraint is each x, the neighbor of each x should also have the same prediction.
No.
No.
Oh yeah. The concept of projected.
Okay. So maybe I go too far. Let's keep going on.
So, if the new x prime is not inside Q, then they
Mm.
will find a x inside Q that have the minimum distance to the x prime. So
Mm.
that's called a projection. So they project it back
Mm.
into the Q.
Why is called projection? Projection somehow means transformation. I just.
Yeah, I
Mm,
know. For example, this
mm,
is set Q.
mm.
However, like in some iteration, you find that x prime is here, and
Yeah.
they will project it back like
Yeah, I got it. I got
here.
it.
Yeah,
I got a point. So
yeah,
I'm just talking about the naming issue. So if I'm the one we call the boundary, the or bounded gradient descendant, and that will be a more accurate
mm,
term for that.
right,
Because projections based on our understanding,
yeah,
projection means that we need to project a low dimension to high dimension or vice versa,
yeah,
right? So it involves some transformation, and projection more than means that there's a information change. Here, the dimension was just the same. We just want to keep, when we apply stochastic gradient descendant, we do not want, we just want the gradient, we just want, when we move the solution or move the x, we do not want x to go beyond the boundary, right? So in terms of namings, maybe the bounded one might be better. But that's just my
yeah.
speculation. So let's don't
Mm,
know what other. Let's keep going on.
yeah. So I just spent some slides to
Mm,
explain what is projected gradient descent.
mm,
Yeah. So that's the difference.
mm,
And then also how they measure the distortion. Um, this is from another paper, but they use the same notation in this paper. So
mm,
maybe I can clarify what's the meaning of the notion. So when we talk about L0, it means this distance measure. It means the number of coordinates I such that xi is not equal to the x prime I. So that just means when you have a benign sample and one adversarial sample, this distance calculate how many pixels that is altered.
mm.
And the L2 distance is just Euclidean distance. And L infinity means the maximum change to any of the coordinates. So that just means um, the difference between each pixels, the maximum value um, of the distance between each pixels.
Okay, so
Mm.
uh, so may I ask the L3 distance?
No, they just propose those
Yeah,
three.
yeah. So based on their definitions, what is L3? Do you know?
Oh,
So
L3.
L infinite. So I'm talking. So I'm just extending the topic of Ln,
Mm.
right? No, we're talking about the cases when the n equals 0 to and
Infinite.
infinite. So let me think about it. So this is constant number, right? So L1 is supposed to be
No,
at
there's no L1 or L whatever.
L3.
They just three. Oh, sorry. Oh, just three.
Um, no L1.
Mm.
Uh, I'm not that sure. Let's keep
Huh?
this. I'm not that sure. So
Okay.
suppose, yeah. So if you can do a quick Google search, there must be some answer for L1 distance.
But I checked this paper. So there's a
Mm,
section about the notion of the distance, and
mm.
they only got three. So
So here I just quickly searched Google, and it recommended us to tell what is the difference between L1 and L2 distance. I just
yeah,
shared
that is defined in that
L1,
is formally
L1,
defined.
L1, L2 norm, right? So there's more like
Yeah.
L1.
But in that paper, they
Mm.
used this as a like notation.
Okay, so
Mm.
let's keep going on. So
Mm.
that's not a big issue. Let's keep going on.
Mm.
Mm.
And then the assumption of their paper is that those existing defense technique only look at the local neighborhood, and that is a limitation for all of them. And I think information from larger neighborhoods, both in more direction and at greater distance, can help
Sorry,
them.
so I still have
Mm,
a question to go.
mm,
When we are using PGD, and how can it make sure we can reach the region classification?
Reach the region.
Region classification assumes that given x and all
Yeah.
its neighbors are of the same labor of x, right? And how that could happen and how that consequence can be ensured by PGD. Is that possible?
PGT just
Mm,
for example, we talk about
mm,
three different distance measurements,
mm,
and that is used to measure the distance between the
mm.
benign sample and the adversarial sample. And
Yes.
when we set the constraint, it might be like we say um, the L0 distance should not be larger than a certain limit. So when they do the iteration
Mm.
updates, they would check the new generated X if that
New
new
generated x. Okay.
if the distance between that new generated X and the original samples is larger than our predefined limitation, then they would just
So we're talking about the model
mm,
training, right? We're talking about the model training.
mm,
And when we're updating x, so this x is the weights, right?
this X
It's the
is
weights.
not weight,
It's
is
not weights.
sample. Is the
When we are training, how can we
oh
change it?
training? What do you mean?
No, whatever SGD or PDG, we're
Uh,
talking about the training. Training means
uh,
that updating the weights,
yeah.
right? So when we're updating the weights, you are setting the boundary, right? You're talking about. Can you go back to the previous one? So you're talking about setting a queue, right? You set up a queue, and when
Mm,
x is equal, when this x was going to, when you updated the weights, we are
mm.
setting a boundary there. So if we're out of boundaries, uh, we can. Uh,
Sorry, hello. I think here as SGD is training, but PGD is trying to generate some adversarial
Yeah.
sample.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
okay.
The X here is the
Mm.
input sample.
Okay, I think thanks for the clarification. So here x is about the samples. So when we do so here the point is, so this PDG is for data augmentation.
Mm.
Okay, so your point that we are applying PDG for data augmentation. Okay, now it's very clear.
Yeah.
Now it's very clear. So okay, thanks. Okay, so here, so when we get a PDGs, we can make sure. So there is no need for us to sample or generate an infinite number of adversary samples. We just need to generate the neighbors close to the existing sample, and that'll be enough.
Yeah.
Mm,
Yeah.
okay. Mm,
Yeah. So their assumption is maybe if you can go to more directions and at greater distance, then those adversarial samples might compromise the previous
yeah,
defense
that'll
attack.
be
Yeah.
straightforward. Yeah.
So basically, the paper is split into three parts. The first part is they demonstrate one new attack method that can evade region classification defense system. And the second one is they introduce an analysis of decision boundaries around an input instance that can explain why their new attack can evade region classification. And further, in the third part, they use those information to distinguish the benign sample and the adversarial samples. So they propose a new defense strategy against their own adversarial attack.
Mm. Yeah, but when we look into these contributions, so in my mind, or is that their visualized version by our tool. Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Let's keep going on.
And yeah, the background and setup is they only look at tasks of image classification problem, and the data set is mixed data set and CIFAR10.
Mm.
And for the adversarial samples, it is untargeted. That means when you do the adversarial attack,
As long as it's
um,
classified into a wrong label, that is
you,
fine.
you don't need to set a target. And they use a root mean error to measure the distance between benign sample and adversarial sample. Root mean just.
I understand what
No,
root
yeah,
mean.
then what's your?
Yeah, my question is that we apply root means on the intermediate layers or in the
Input. No,
layer?
just the image.
Just the image. Also, so in pixel level.
Yes. So when I talk about the input space, it's the image input space in this paper. And the defense method they use, the first one is the adversarial retraining, and the second one is region classification. And yeah, so we already talked about.
Let me
what
go
is
back. Can you go back to previous ones?
this
So
one?
it's using input level classifications. So by right, wouldn't it be better to using gap layer classification? So we can just keep these questions in our mind. So whether their conclusion will still be remain, because anyways, the deep neural network model has do a set of transformation and projections, and project the high dimensional pixel level information into a compressed vectors, maybe of 2048 or 2048 and 1024. So after we apply these transformations, and the last layer will be the most informative and most abstract version. So in that case, will that anyway, taking different input, taking different layers may result in different results.
Yeah. Okay. And
Okay.
yeah, so we already explained what is region classification, and their attack use the existing optimization technique to generate examples that can first fool the region classifier while also minimizing its distortion. So how did I do it? Is first let F be the region classifier and VI be a small perturbation. So when I said Fi x, that just means the outcome of region classifier with input x plus the small perturbation Vi. And how they design the Li is they out Z Z is the last layer, which is the logics of the output. So they pick out the value for the correct class Y and minus the next most likely class. And when the prediction is incorrect, then the value would bottom out at minus K logics. And if the
this is minus k is a positive value.
Yeah, K is a positive.
K is a positive
value. K
value.
is like the confidence. When K is 0, then that means you only need the attack. We only need the model to predict it as incorrect. But if K is larger, then you need your model to not only predict it as wrong, but also with a strong confidence that is wrong.
I mean the gap. So the larger the K, the larger the gap between
correct.
The top two, right? The top two.
Not
the correct one and
the next most likely class. Yes. So that's how they design Li. So Li.
So here, so let me confirm. Y is the correct label, right?
Yes. Y is the value for correct.
For the legit and the confidence. Let me see. Well, if it is pretty correctly, it's a positive. Then it will be.
The loss will be high if the model predict it as correct.
Yeah, and I'm thinking about it was a positive. So, okay, I get it. I got it. So
yeah,
you want the larger the case, the more successful the attacker it is, right?
Yeah.
Mm.
And LI is for one specific perturbation VI. And what they do on, and I also have.
By the way, let me reconfirm here. So when we apply, so this is about the region classification. So somehow, okay, so, but let's think about this one. So, when we do the adversary trainings, let's using X as a sample in our data set. And we will generate all its neighbors. When neighbors, let me use a small triangle here, right? And again, these regions, we can do the augmentation to make sure all these regions are all the same label, right? So, but it cannot be guaranteed the neighbor of the boundary sample. Suppose this is adversary samples has to be trained with of the same prediction with X. It is quite possible, right? So if we take this as the origin and draw another cycle, it here let's just say this, we cannot guarantee these areas can be further can be with the same prediction as the older one, as those cross and triangle. Have I made myself understood? So in this case, we can always find a. So just like the cannon rat, the cannon rat, the cannon rat possible. So when the attacker going to generate the attacker, there's no need for attacker to using original X, because perturbate on the original X, will be all its neighbors will be of the same label. However, if we can find another sample who lies or located at the boundary of the training small ball, and those red regions will still be vulnerable, right? So in this case, such a defense technique is no better than the original adversary. It's no better than the original adversary training. No.
Maybe we can
So
go to the next slide.
Maybe let me clarify. The region classification is for defense, right? It's actually for defense. It's not for attack. It's not for attack. So the point is that those region classification is just a very specialized adversary training technique, and it's just giving us a bound of where we should train, where we should do the adversary trainings, and that's all, right?
Oh, sorry, I think the region classification didn't do adversarial training. It just utilized the fact that if attacker generates the adversarial example, then the neighbors of it may not be also adversarial. And here I think the opt margin is trying to attack this region classifier.
Yeah.
So let me repeat Rofan's point. So Rofan's point is that given adversary samples and OS neighbors, and OS neighbors are all of the same, or given a samples, OS neighbors are all of the same prediction.
Given an adversarial sample, all its neighbor may not be adversarial.
I think
can this process make sure such a property? May not, right? How could it be? So when we the training, who consider the training process of PGD, so giving an X is going to generate adversary samples, and it only generates the adversary samples around the neighbor as the neighbors of a specific training samples, and that's all. And we train them.
So yeah, that's why those PGD attack can only generate some specific adversarial example. So the region classifier just based on this intuition, they try to look at the neighbor for those adversarial example and do a majority vote. Then the majority vote may not be also adversarial. That's why if you do the vote, they will get correct label.
I think for the region classification, their assumption is you might be wrong at one specific adversarial samples, but those
Yeah, I'm talking. Yeah,
those
I
yeah.
understand the point. So what I'm asking is that
Mm,
when we are applying adversary samples, just like the blue circle, right? So
yeah.
you can just make sure in this circle and all the neighbors and all the clusters are of the same prediction.
Yeah.
However, if we using my red, giving them my red cycle, in
Yeah.
these red cycles, it's not affected by the PGD, right?
Yeah.
So this region
Yeah.
will not be trained.
Yeah.
So by this means, if the attackers would generate such a adversary samples, for example, generate adversary, let's use the black one, generate such adversary sample here, right? So it may not do the,
When you
it cannot be defended.
you mean um the attacker based on the X and generate this adversarial sample,
Yes.
and then region classifier cannot work, right? They
Yeah,
need
so that means it just provide a very bounded region. In
yeah.
that bounded
So
region, it was safe. As long as we go as long as we go as far as possible, then this defense becomes trivial, right?
yeah. So that's your point is correct.
Yeah, yeah, and
Right.
also, do you remember? So when Zhang Chen is here, I'm not sure whether you still remember this name. So we asked him to verify one of Jingyi's paper on XC 18. So they have assumption that all the adversary samples lie on the classification boundary, lie
Oh.
nearby the classification boundary,
Oh.
and intuitively it's incorrect from my point of view. So in this case, we ask him to verify because the adversary samples will have confidence just what is shown in this formula. So as long as the adversary samples can go as far as possible, and the adversary samples can fully cross the boundary and lie in a very far away in the original classified boundary of the model, right?
Yeah.
And so in this case, this region classification is very trivial, right? It's very trivial. It's just training a very small bore or small boundaries, and inside the boundary, the model is safe. As far as go beyond the boundaries, and I think assume that it'll be very easy to go beyond the boundary, and then okay, so let's keep going on. So you can see the top tier conferences is not that some of the idea is very trivial.
And remember that the intuition of this paper is they think the region classifier only look at the local neighborhood, and they feel that if you can go to different direction and at a greater distance, then it can the region classifier can be compromised.
Yeah, that would be very
Yeah,
costly
yeah, yeah.
because of course we can train the boundary iteration by iteration. For example, the next boundary will be larger. Of course, it will be safer. It can be even larger. It can be even safer. But the problem is that what is a boundary and what's a anyway, if you go the boundary larger, just always try, and we can go here, right? We can go here. Then you are not safe anymore,
Mm.
right? Okay, let's keep going on.
Yeah, yeah. So, I had a question here, but I feel not many people here today. So, the function of this part of loss is just to for the region classifier. They choose one. Let's say VI is a direction, and they go beyond that direction and make sure if a sample, here X prime is the adversarial sample, and if this adversarial sample goes beyond the direction of VI, then it is still will be classified as a wrong label, right?
Yeah.
So that's the intuition of LI. So what they did later is they find 20 vector, 20 di- orthogonal vectors as different directions, and they make sure this part of the loss, oh, this part of
Sorry,
the
I lost
loss
where
make
a VI
sure,
should be orthogonal vectors.
yeah. So So
Um,
VI is orthogonal, and they make sure if
mm,
the x prime go beyond those direction, then they are still safe. They can be still predicted as the wrong label. And the first part is to make sure the perturbation is small.
let me here. So here C minus minimize error one loss.
So I think I feel that
Okay, okay. Let's see. There's error one here. You can
one,
see
yeah.
error one. Error one is the
That
vector.
means they choose the V1
Okay.
direction.
Oh,
So that
single
is equal
vectors.
to L
Mm,
V1
mm,
plus F
mm.
prime. So
Yeah.
it's like they find
Mm.
a adversarial x prime and they
In
go
different
to
in different
20
direction.
direction and they make sure in those 20 directions
Mm.
the x prime can follow the region classifier, and also the first part is to minimize the distortion.
Yeah, so here is a little bit of mathematical details. So
Mm,
for single vectors, so means that giving a vi and a vj, vi times vj will be equal to 0,
yeah.
right?
Mm.
So okay, so it's
And then
more.
they just utilize some optimization algorithm to solve this function. And that's how you, when you given a input x and you find an x prime,
Mm,
this is the new attack method.
okay, keep going on.
Mm. Mm.
Let me look at it. Wait.
Mm.
Existing optimizer. Okay, so your point is x is smaller, x and x prime will be equal as much as possible.
So the perturbation will be small.
Yeah, perturbation is
Yeah.
small, and for these signals, and this is attack, right? Now we're
This
talking
is
about it. This is attack.
attack. Yeah, this is the attack to for region classifier.
Hmm. And but let me think about it. These directions, we add the direction together, all together. So x prime was supposed to be an adversarial sample, right?
Yes,
Simple. Let me think. I see something weird here. Error one.
because for the region classifier, when we put the adversarial samples x prime,
Mm.
and then
Near x,
yeah,
near
so
x lot,
yeah.
and and then so the point is that we need to generate x prime. So let's say this is x, and somehow we need to start with x prime to go here, right? So somehow go x prime be here. Am I right?
Um, I, I think it doesn't matter where it go. It
Yeah,
just
yeah, I understand. So for now,
oh
so it's go to different directions, but he would always make sure the x prime will have limited distance
two
where
x.
to x,
Yes,
and we'll apply. So what's the goal of these 20 vectors?
because in region classifier, it finds the neighborhood of input x and vote for the majority prediction,
Mm.
and they try to find
No,
an
got
x
it, got it, got it,
prime.
got it. So
Yeah,
somehow
make
it's
sure
being
the
pushed
x
on it.
prime, those neighbors
Mm,
around x prime
mm.
is also have
Yeah,
the wrong label.
so by this means the more number of these vectors, the more likely we can find a region, right?
Yes, yes.
Mm,
Why they only choose 20 is because it's very computational expensive. So
mm,
they couldn't go as
Maybe
high.
sometimes if we are the hacker, we can try even in a more radical way. We use 10 or 5.
Mm,
So maybe we can find a less
yeah,
successful,
but
but
it's
it's more more efficient. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So they in their experiment they just use 20, and one of the
And you can see the solution is quite trivial, right? Whereas, and
yeah, very
I
straightforward.
just curious about their writing because they got into the
ICLR.
ICLR, yeah. And in the future, I think we can definitely have the confidence to try this one. Mm. And maybe
Um,
just keep track of the deadline, so we can make some
yeah,
planning.
yeah. So that's basically all. And then the first part of the experiment is to evaluate the distortion part, and they use apart from their own method, they also find three baseline. One is FGSM, and one is called opt brittle. So this is a attack from this paper with k equals to 0. And I think the difference is here they have 20 vectors, but in Carlini and Wegener's paper, they have only one vector. I think that's the difference. And the opt brittle is with k equals to 0.
Let's go
and
back. So
OBD
the k,
strong is
when the k equal to, hey, can we go back? The k,
this one.
Yeah, the k, okay,
So
see.
k is the confidence.
So more confident, k is
Yeah. So one is
more confident.
you only need it to predict the wrong label, and the other one is strong. You can see it from the name. So they compare 4 different attack strategy, and their result is this is their result, and the accuracy is pretty high. And they also found their distortion is between opt brittle and opt strong.
Opt brittle and opt strong. So here 100% means it means attack success.
This is the defense strategy. This is not with any defense, and this is the adversarial retraining with.
Okay, so the normal is sorry. So the normal is for normal
comparison.
Sorry. So what is normal comparison?
Normal is just a normal model trained on means data set, and the other the ADV training is training with benign samples and adversarial samples. So it's supposed to be much difficult to attack than the normal one.
Okay, so 100% means it generated 100% of the attack rate. Okay, so the strong. So you can see the successful rate is the same with opt brittle, right? Yeah, I'm just comparing the optimal.
Oh yeah, it also, but this experiment is meant for evaluate the distortion part.
Distortion part.
That means they need, if the distortion is low, then it's better.
So it means that it achieves higher
distortion. Just means their new adversarial samples is not far away from the original.
Yeah, I understand. So okay, so I think so. It means the more distortion, the better.
The low.
So you can see for the brittle is the baseline, right?
Yeah, I would say.
Brittle is the baseline. It's baseline. So for baseline for the opt brittles, in both models, it achieved 100% adversary attack successful, right? And this value supposed to be the distortion ratio. And we can see that the opt margin was always larger.
Yeah, so it's not as good as opt brittle.
Okay. So what's the point? They're not about to perform the baseline.
But they have other evaluation measures, and in this scenario, they are better than the opt brittle. I think from this evaluation, I only say their conclusion is that the distortion is larger than opt brittle, but smaller than opt strong.
Why not use opt brittle? Why to use the approach?
Because this attack is designed to attack the region classifier.
Mm,
And
yeah,
their
so
method,
it will be reasonable to be a little bit far away.
yeah.
Mm,
So this is the experiment against the
mm,
region classification.
mm,
So this far, let me, this is region classifier, and this is only the point classifier. And yeah, with strategy of normal, that means no.
and what is a point classifier?
Region classifier, we
Mm,
look at the region local neighborhood around
mm.
the input. For the point classifier, we only look at that example.
Okay, just non-region, with the defense, without defense, with
Mm.
without the defense. Okay.
Mm-mm.
Mm,
And then the further, because they mentioned two defense strategy. The other one is
mm,
whether use the adversarial retraining. So actually there are 4 columns here for each data set.
mm. Okay, so let me look at it. Let me look at it. So the region. So it's when so the value is be accurate, the accurate rate, right? Accuracy, right? The accuracy after test.
I think it should be the successful rate for the defense of region classification. So if it's 1%, that means the region classifier fails most of the time, fails 99%.
Mm.
So yeah, so that means more effective attack would just result in low accuracy.
Let me look at the optobreto. The optobreto, which optobreto is using the adversary, and which the third line is you. So is the model okay to classification defense? So all the values has been all the model has been defended by the. Let me recap that. So somehow I just get a bit
So
confused.
the first column is you
The
is
first column is
a
normal.
normal classifier with region classification different strategy.
Okay, I got it. So this is with the let me see.
Like we have two kind of difference.
No, got it. So
then there are 4 columns.
so this part is about point classes is about you with without region classifier.
Yes. Yeah.
And a region classifier is with region classifier. And when within each with or without region classifier, we compare the model with and without adversary training, right? So
Yeah.
that's the point. Okay.
Yeah.
And in that case, okay, so this two part is the most difficult one, right?
Yeah.
So it's
So
the strong, the most,
Yeah.
the strongest defense, and the issue is okay. Keep going on.
Oh, and also after that they mentioned it's very computational expensive. I think they said in their slowest attack, their attack takes around 8 minutes per image for CVAT model.
So it means that it's very computational expensive. So it's not appropriate for so their approach is not appropriate for the online attack. The online attack, 8 seconds, right? But not necessarily true.
Yeah,
It is.
but 8 minutes, I don't know. But if the successful rate is high, then 8 minutes might not be a big problem.
But the problem is that if so, giving for this example, right? So the accuracy is that this is 90%. Optobreto is 90%, and then here is 10%.
Yeah.
Right. So it means that as long as the efficiency of optobreto is 10 times larger than optomargin, then we can always compromise the model with the same number of the adversary sample.
Yeah, that's
right.
True.
Anyway. Okay.
And then second, they propose to analyze the decision boundaries around the adversarial samples they generate or benign samples. So to be more specific, they evaluate the distance to the nearest, or for each sample, they evaluate the distance to the nearest boundary in different directions. And also they would record the adjacent decision regions. That means if they find, if the predicted class um, flips, then they would record the new class. Oh, yeah, how do I do it is when they have an input x, and for each direction, they would check
This
every,
direction is a 20 or single one.
not here,
Mm.
they choose, for
Uh,
CIVA10, they choose
this
1000
or
random
single
orthogonal direction. And for MINST, because MINST only have
smaller
784
mm,
for
direction
pixels.
pixels. Okay.
So they said both positive and negative direction. So a total of 1,568 direction.
Okay.
And for each direction, they would like move a step forward and then a step forward until the predicted label change.
Mm.
And yeah, for MINS data set, they check more frequently. And however, for CIVA10, I guess it's more complicated. So, for every 2 units, and the units means R and E distance.
Mm.
Yeah, and last, they also record the predicted class of the adjacent region. So this is the experiment from one samples. For the MINS, let's first look at the MINS data set. So the biennial sample have the label of 8, and the how do you interpret it? The result is because they have 1000 random directions, right? And then so here they would have 1000 dots, and each dot, the y-axis means the distance of that direction, and the color of the dot means the adjacent class. So they, after they get all the distance and colors, they sort the result and place it in the plot.
Mm. So
Can
this
you
is just
get
a
the
partial.
idea?
I somehow got it. So
Mm.
it means how large the distance with each class, right? How so
Mm.
giving there's 10 class, and giving a sample where it have its own class, so we have 9 other classes on its boundary, but it's only show. Oh, okay. But the color is a
Because
little bit.
you go
Okay,
from
I got it, got it.
1000
Yeah, yeah,
directions.
got it. So somehow, for example, giving no defense. So let me read it. In no defense, it is
Mm.
because it's a little bit hard to read the sample
Uh,
because this is 9 color, right? So these are actually 9 colors.
10 colors.
Why is 10 colors? Because
There
for
are 10
eight,
labels.
but it itself will have a label, right?
Oh, I get it. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so it
Yeah,
should be 9 colors.
you
But
need. Mm.
okay, so in these examples, for example, for 5, it means that uh, all here is the closest to the yellow one is mean 8, right? And then later it will be so it's so and at the point here, so it means that it will be for 5 after the adversary samples it becomes
No,
mm,
first we have a benign sample of label 8, and then
yes
this attack strategy generate one adversarial samples with
mm,
labels of 5,
mm,
and their method generated one adversarial samples of label 5, and FGSM generate
mm.
a
Adversary number 2
adversarial sample of label 2, and then for each, we have 4 samples here, and each sample we have 1000 direction.
mm,
Means
yeah
data set is 1005 500 something direction, and you go to that direction and record the distance and the adjacent class
Yeah.
labels, and then you sort them by distance and plot them in the image.
Yeah, I understand. So how can we further read it?
Oh, so yeah, the first conclusion is they found the plot for benign sample and adversarial samples are very different. That's one of the conclusion. You just look at the plot
Mm.
here, so it's different. And the second conclusion is they claim that
Oh, by the
there.
way, so here there's supposed to be a line here. Is that supposed?
Oh, the
Oh, no,
black line. You
no,
mean
no,
the block?
no, no. Yeah, the black line is supposed to be a threshold.
So the black line means the expected distance that region classifier will check.
Oh, I got it. I got it. So, okay.
I guess this part they didn't show it.
Mm.
I didn't
And the
know.
point is that they can always find a means that the operator can finally can find less. For example, for the benign ones. Okay, for the benign ones, no.
That just
Let,
means the benign one is far away from the decision boundary.
mm.
Because yeah.
And for
And the
operator,
operator one, the samples they generated is very near the decision boundaries.
mm.
And yeah. And then they said the difference between the benign samples and adversarial samples are very different just from the plots.
Mm.
And the second conclusion is they claim their method, the plot of their method lies higher, but I didn't quite see this point from the.
What is the light higher?
That means like this line is
Mm.
higher than, I don't know. They just said their plot lies higher, so I'm quite confused about this point.
Let me think about it. So,
Mm.
so, so for the opt margin, it actually takes less steps, right? Okay,
Mm.
sorry. So
More
here,
steps because they.
sorry, it needs to take more steps to reach the boundary, and
Mm.
it seems that given a point or given adversary sample, it's always somehow lie in the cross boundary of multiple of multiple
Classes.
classes, right? So for example, when we do the visualization, it is possible that, for example, you have a boundary, and a boundary. So somehow there. So for the optobrittle and FGSM, it will be like the generate a boundary like this way, right? But for the opt margin, it may generate in this region.
Yeah,
Is that true?
might be. I don't
Mm.
know.
Yeah,
You might
because it will be far away from the original boundary, so it
yeah,
will be
right.
have more mixed. You can see the boundary is kind of mixed here.
But I think the statistic is quite consistent with your previous point when you
Mm.
said if you generate adversarial samples that is far away from
Mm.
the decision boundaries, then
Yeah, so here the point is, so here the very good point. You can think about it. A adversary sample from a philosophical point of view is somehow like undersampled data in active learning,
oh
right?
yeah.
Right? It undersampled active learning. So when the traditional active learning is always sample the data with high entropy, which means the boundary, right? But it is also, so we are going to ask questions whether we can sample on the region with very high confidence by the model.
With
But it was
very high confidence. Why high?
just like this opt margin. No, so given a model, when it has a very high confidence, it can also predict to have a very have it's still likely to.
But
Mm,
in their attack method, they set k to be 0, so that means
okay,
they only need they
they're
if
still
they
looking to the
set k to
boundary.
be high,
Mm,
then
mm,
then
okay. So the boundary.
But I
So,
think not so much information to be get from the result. They also, when I read their paper, I feel that their claim is not that strong. But anyway, I think the only important information you can get from this is that they found the difference between the benign samples and adversarial sample. There's a
very different,
different.
and for their after margins, they find that they are so they can so more like they are going to show that they are going to generate a different kinds of laboratory samples, right? Because the pattern looks here, all their positions is but look at it, yeah, you can the position will be very different in a high dimensional space, right?
Yeah. Anyway, that's the distance. Oh yeah, the distance property, and then second.
And how about the defense? And how about the defense? We haven't introduced after the adversary trainings and
Yeah,
the
we will talk
denial.
about it later, but first
Okay.
we can read the plot.
Yeah.
And this is the result from one example, and then they also give the summary statistic. The plot is the average distance of all samples, and yeah, from this statistic plot, first we have an observation that first I need to explain the color of the lines. So blue means benign samples, and red is FGSM method, and green is their attack method. Is the OPT margin, and the orange one is the OPT brittle.
Brittle.
Yeah, OPT brittle. And the first conclusion they get from the result is that um, their
This is for one sample or every sample. This for every sample.
yeah, average. The green line is always above the black line, which means their attack method can evade the region classifier defense. That's their explanation. Like here, the green line is above the black line. So that's their explanation on why their attack can
And how about the red?
succeed.
And how? Yeah, I understand. So this means it can. It means it can always
Yeah, then if
generate a sample, advanced sample which are far away from the one, far away, far away from the sample generated by the optic brittle. But how about FGSM? It seems that the
yeah,
FGSMs.
if FGSM is above the black line, then FGSM can work as well.
Oh, I see. So
But
FGSM.
the first point is just an explanation on why their attack can work, and then the second point is that even though um, they just said they didn't find a statistic or a threshold that can accurately distinguish the benign and adversarial sample.
Let me read it. The black line. Green. So the method could beyond where the reading comes from. So,
I guess they wanted to find us.
so, so why is the rank of images supposed to be the direction, right? So from the samples and
Rank of images.
okay. So somehow let me see. This is rank of because it's a y-axis is about the distance, and the x-axis is supposed to be the direction. Am I right? The direction, or it just pick up the because this is all the average distance, right?
I feel that for one image, they would have a lot of direction, and then for all the direction, they would average out and give.
Yeah. I understand this. Yeah. So somehow
and then they rank the distance of different images.
Mm.
Yes, so I guess they originally they tried to find a threshold in this um, clause that tries to distinguish between denial and adversarial samples, but they failed to do that.
Let me read. Give me more while to read these
Okay.
images.
So
Black line median. So anyway, if there's a black line, it means that under production, if there's adversary sample, it can under in its production. And so the larger number, the higher the line, the more likely the method can compromise
region classifier.
the reading classifier,
Mm,
right?
mm,
So
mm.
giving that the red line is FGSM. So
Yeah.
why FGSM? Oh, FGSM disappeared after the virtual training. Mm, mm. And the red one supposed to be okay. So somehow we're using such a graph to visualize, or
Yeah.
somehow to it's not kind of visualize, it's kind of the measurement
Different.
to measure the boundary. You measure the boundary. Yeah. So maybe we can still think about this way, because for this case it is harder to read, because for me it takes me maybe 1 or 2 minutes to digest
It
fully.
also very it
Yeah.
is also difficult for me to read those
Yeah,
statistics.
yeah. Fully digest. So now I think I have fully grasped the idea. But if giving our visualization approach, maybe you can provide more insight. Mm.
Hmm.
Okay, let's keep going on.
Yeah.
So somehow it's just
I did
provided.
spend quite some time on those
Mm.
weird
Yeah, yeah. So
information.
anyway, so you can see their work is very straightforward,
Mm.
right? I think it's almost if I understand, if my guess is correct, we
Mm.
almost at the end of the presentation.
No, we also have one part like
About the defense, right?
yeah.
Sorry, I
So
got it.
so in order and then they propose a question in order to like defend their attack if they can just find a threshold in this clause to distinguish the benign samples and adversarial sample, then all things can be done, right? But they didn't find such a threshold. And later, oh, we have one experiment left. That is the adjacent class purity. That means uh, they compute the purity of the top K classes around an input image. So for one input image, because it go beyond different directions, and later it might have like 1,000 and something classes, and then the rank one means the top one classes. How much portion did the top one uh, classes like dominate? For example, like if you have 1,000 directions and you have 500 of them all be classified into uh, one class, or the adjacent class to be one class, then the result should be 0.5. Can you get the idea? Like
And so what's this line means? This line means the red and
so
red
so
blue.
so so that means um the top one classes, the portion of the top one class.
Mm.
For example, for the means data set, you have 10 class, like one image, and it goes
But you
to
have
different
only
directions
four colors.
because there are four strategies.
Okay, there's four strategy. Okay, so what's orange means?
Orange, oh, orange is the
The
uh
yeah, I see orange
OPT brittle.
OPT brutal and so OPT brutal have
So they're just
so if I understand correctly, this graph convey almost the same idea of the previous graph, right?
mm,
The information is contained. It's just going to show that
the color.
yeah, the just say the purity or still about the boundary information, but manifested in a very different way. Maybe we can pause these images. Let's go to the defense technique.
Yeah. So it's not easy to look at those information and directly give you an answer on how to defend their attack. So what they do is they design a neural network to do the work. So first,
Oh,
they
so let me go back. Let me ask. Let me interpret it here. The previous one. You can see, if we can draw a black line here, for example, if we can draw a black line here, and draw a black line here, or draw a curve here, so we can do the classification.
classify.
You get my
Oh
point?
yeah, yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
so that's what they want to do the neural network model. So that's what I said just now. But what I said that we use the SVM to do the drop here, but the neural network model can learn the curve there. So
Yeah.
okay, so that's that's a metaphoric interpretation of their work, right? So they feed into the Benaya website and feed into the samples. They're going to feed into the samples they generated by the OPT margin, and then they do the classification again, and that's all, right? Or there's something more complicated.
No, you only need one strategy, and you input the benign samples and adversarial samples is generated. Because here we only involve with one attack.
Yeah. So So my point is that suppose we just want to distinguish the samples, the benign samples and the samples generated by the OPT margin.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah,
So we
yeah.
just collected these samples again and again and train the model. And maybe the training process could be iterative. Is the training process one shot or iterative?
You mean train this neural network?
Yeah. So for example, we have an OPT margin, right? We have OPT margin, and this OPT margin can keep repetitively generated adversary sample. So let me raise an example here. So let me blue is the benign, right? So I'm using blue here like this.
Okay.
So this is a blue region, right? And maybe the original ones, the OPT margin is green, right? So suppose it's here. Right?
Yeah.
So for the first classifier, we're going to generate a line, a boundary here to classify the benign and the green one, right? So this is the idea of this classifier. But of course, if we have such a classifier, actually we can feed this classifier into the loss function of the OPT margin generator. The OPT, what I mean is the OPT margin can further attack this boundary, right? Because OPT margin was threshold. So in this case, the red one will be, so that's more like an active learning. So then the red one will be in this region. The green one will be in this.
Point.
Yeah, you get a point.
Between the black line.
Yeah, the green one be here. So in this case, we need to further feed into the margin, and then this one will be gone, and we will learn the classifier will be here. And by keeping the iterations, and we can finally reach a classifier which can more accurately classify or distinguish the benign and the OPT margin. So that is my point. Right. So that's the possible. Maybe we can do this later.
But anyway, let me go on with.
Okay, so the solution is still very naive, and they even don't think about the iterative and evolving issue, right?
Yeah, actually, at the end of their paper, they talk about because the information around of the decision boundaries around the benign sample and adversarial sample is very different. So they think their attack method can only the adversarial samples generated by their attack method have a distribution very different from the true one. But I think your
iterative active learning
might
can
be the
improve.
solution of their concern.
Okay.
Yeah, but anyway, so they just collect the purity scores and also the boundary distance of their adversarial samples or banal samples and go through some convolutional layers and finally followed by two fully connected layer, and it is a binary classification with one to be banal sample and the other one to be adversarial samples.
Yeah, so that'll be kind of straightforward, and that's result is supposed to be well defended their optimal
Yeah.
margin, right? So they definitely will, because the distribution will be different. That'll be, there are no surprise there.
Yeah. So I think they have two training attacks. The first one, because in this neural network, we would need
And
one.
here, and one, I think one of the, if I'm the reviewer, I'm going to ask that I will not accept their paper in this version. In this version, I will ask them to keep attacking their new version of the model, and to see how many rounds of iteration can be converged, and that'll be the idea, right?
Yeah. So they compare their method with OPT brittle, and after that, first they input some banal samples, and the false positive rate. That means they input the banal samples and their classifier predicted as adversarial sample, so it's positive, and it's the error rate is 9.6%, and finally, yeah, that's why they said their accuracy is 90.4%. And then follow.
Okay, so I got it. So for here, that means that their optimal margin is harder. It's actually a harder adversarial sample than optic Pareto, but even at harder, they can also achieve the accuracy over 90%, right? So in this case, somehow, yeah. So we can see their idea is very straightforward. I think our approach is better than this work, right?
So yeah, basically that's all. So the whole paper, they first propose a new attack method to against the region classifier difference, and then they talk about how to analyze the information about decision boundaries around samples, and finally they propose a new defense strategy to.
Okay, so this paper is fairly straightforward. I think based on our visualization was successful, we can it will not only provide a facility to debugging the training process. I think it will be also considered as idea generator. So when we have more observations, we gain more insight. You can see the insight and rationale of this paper is fairly straightforward. But you can send me the paper. I would like to look into how they write it, how they write the paper, and force such a simple idea into the top tier conference. And that might be what we need to learn from them.
And I feel that plot is really hard to interpret.
Yeah, it's not good. It's not good. So we have larger room to improve. And I think overall, I think we did it overall. So when we are reading more top tier AI conferences, we find the idea is sometimes straightforward, and maybe the paper writing is good. And I think writing is fairly important for the publication, for successful publication. You can send me these papers, and also you can send me the related work, and I'm going to
I already sent it in our
group.
I can send you another one. Yeah.
Okay, so I think take a fairly long time for these group meetings, and thanks Kang Sing and thanks Xianglin to give the presentations, and now I think we are on the right way to go, and we should have a confidence to targeting for and targeting for a successful publication in the future, in the near, maybe in 2 weeks. Okay, thanks everyone. Let's call it a day. Bye bye.